Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, the Master of Fun and Wonder. Today, certainly the existential Mr. Rogers. I am here once again, Robert Meyer Burnett, with Robservations, the show about something. This is, of course, Robservations, episode number 240. And it's only episode 240 because of you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, you imagination connoisseurs who have been here since the very beginning, and all of you new subscribers and new people. Of course, Gilbert is here, Tallulah is here. Everybody's excited for today's show, and why not? A very important film, especially for all of us imagination connoisseurs, has opened. That's right. Todd Phillips, The Joker. And we're going to talk about it. I saw it. I went with John Campy and Christian Harloff yesterday, and I saw The Joker. I think Gilbert, before I talk about the Joker, Gilbert, of course, always gets cookies, don't you, buddy? Here, you have a cookie. You want to get up? You want to let people see you? You want to come up? There you go, buddy. Joker is on Gilbert's mind, and Tallulah, you're over here. You get cookies too. So there you guys go. Can't have a show without the dogs, right? You have another one. Now you get down, buddy. Get down. Good boy. Good boy. Get down, boy. Yes. Well, that's Gilbert, ladies and gentlemen. He knew this was going to be an important show. Anyway, the show's brought to you by, as always, Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, you can punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity when you check out and get 20% off of your order. So before I begin, before I jump into, this is going to be a non-spoiler review of The Joker. Maybe not so much a review as commentary, opinion. It's an op-ed. I guess all reviews are. Non-spoiler review. However, if you don't want to know anything about The Joker, don't keep watching. I want to begin by reading something from one of the greatest comic books ever written, The Watchmen. And we're going to see a Watchmen TV series later, but there is a great story that I was reminded of when I was watching Joker. There's a scene in The Watchmen that is very similar in setup and tone to a number of scenes in Joker. And I couldn't help but be reminded of this specific scene. In it, Rorschach has been apprehended. He is talking to a therapist, a black man, which I think is important. And he's talking to his therapist, and he tells the therapist this joke. I'm not going to do it in Rorschach's voice. He said, "I heard a joke once. Man goes to doctor, says he's depressed, says life is harsh and cruel, says he feels all alone in a threatening world. Doctor says, well, treatment is simple. The great clown Pagliacci is in town tonight. Go see him. That should pick you up." The man bursts into tears and says, "But doctor, I am Pagliacci." Good joke. Everybody laugh. Air drum. Curtains. That's a story Rorschach tells his therapist in a few panels of the superlative Watchmen comic book. If you've never read Watchmen, it is one of the greatest, if not the greatest superhero story ever told. I still maintain that it is, even 33 years later. It's much better than the movie. I'm curious about the new TV series for HBO. Says it is a continuation of the comic. So it's probably, if you've never read the comic, in your best interests to read. It is one of those literary masterpieces I would actually call delicious. It tastes good in your brain, even though it might be depressing. But I was struck by that. I couldn't stop thinking about that while I watched Joker. Now, to jump right into it, The Joker is a beautifully made film. It is a stunning piece of cinema. It really is. Joaquin Phoenix's performance is one for the ages. The cinematography is masterful. The direction is, it is just a gorgeous film to look at. And I must say that I thought that as an experience, the score, the film is so just beautifully constructed. However, there is one part of this film that, for me at least, uh, causes it to be, I think, an unbelievable disappointment to me. But I'm going to get to that. I want to read something. So yesterday, Martin Scorsese, I mentioned Martin Scorsese because this movie could not exist. Todd Phillips could not have conceived of this movie without two Martin Scorsese movies. Obviously, Taxi Driver, to which this film shamelessly steals from. But that's okay. It's okay. You know, homages, whatever you want to call it. And The King of Comedy. Now, a lot of people talk about, oh, yes, we know Taxi Driver, and oh, I know King of Comedy. But do you really? Have you really seen them before? I would first of all, Taxi Driver is if you haven't seen Taxi Driver, you really should see it before you see Joker, and also you should see King of Comedy, both Martin Scorsese movies, and you need to see them because this film it shamelessly borrows and pays a tribute to both Taxi Driver and King of Comedy throughout. As a matter of fact, I dare say this movie couldn't have existed, at least in Todd Phillips' mind. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a love letter to two other movies the way Joker is to both Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. But anyway, so yesterday, Martin Scorsese himself had a few choice words about comic book movies, specifically the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He says, I don't see them. I tried, but that's not cinema, he told Empire Magazine about the Marvel movies. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well-made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. That's what Scorsese said. Scorsese said in Empire Magazine. And of course, there's been some fallout today on the old Twitter. James Gunn said, of course, James Gunn, who has directed both indie films, Super, which it's a distant cousin of Joker. But James Gunn, of course, famously directed the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He's going to be directing Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and he's currently directing Suicide Squad. James Gunn said, Martin Scorsese is one of my 5 favorite living filmmakers. I was outraged when people picketed The Last Temptation of Christ without having seen a film. I'm saddened that he's now judging my films in the same way. That said, I will always love Scorsese, be grateful for his contribution to cinema, and can't wait to see The Irishman. C. Robert Cargill, Massa Worm, says, when Scott and I were making Doctor Strange, the vast majority of Marvel's notes were about deepening character, strengthening the story, and asking us if we could make it weirder. Anyone who thinks Marvel is only trying to make theme park rides is being unjust and cynical. And then he goes on to say, as I tweeted last night, I take no issue with Scorsese. The man is a genius. I'm mostly taking issue today with all of these smug freelancers retweeting his quote, patting themselves on the back as if correct and vindicated before lining up to watch and review the next one. That poltergeist, Matt Zoller Seitz, who I really have always admired, says, Scorsese is not saying that theme parks are bad, y'all. He's saying they are primarily visceral experiences and feats of engineering. It's not that radical of an opinion, and he's allowed to have it. Sean M. Burns writes, I love waking up to a timeline full of nerds in a frenzy because Martin Scorsese is insufficiently reverent of their kiddie shit while they're also creaming in their dungarees over a lame Scorsese knockoff starring the clown who fights Batman. Well, there you go. How do I feel? Well, I think Matt Zoller Seitz is right. I think Martin Scorsese is right. Now, here's the thing. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, I have grown up. I was even on an episode of, starring Roger Lodge from Blind Date, an episode of SF Vortex with Stan Lee. Stan Lee and I appeared together on a TV program where He said on the show, Stan Lee said on the show I was on, that it didn't matter who played Peter Parker because Spider-Man was in a mask. So what did it matter? And I said, no, 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 no. Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Who plays Peter Parker is absolutely the most important thing. And Stan Lee then said that he thought I was from Krypton. That's true, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to find that clip because I'd love to put it up. So, do I think Martin Scorsese is wrong? No. Now, here's the thing. He's not wrong because the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I dearly, dearly love is not supposed to be about human beings relating to one another. It's not Kramer versus Kramer. You know, it's not The English Patient. They're fantasy films about superheroes and why ordinary people become superheroes. And once they become superheroes, what happens to them afterwards? They are fantasy. They are heightened reality. They are not supposed to be explorations into we all want them to be great character studies. We all want them to be reflective of real life if superheroes existed. But let's face it, like Martin Scorsese said, they are more like theme park rides, and there's nothing wrong with that. Theme park rides are beautifully engineered. They are amazing. They are flights of fancy. I don't think I've ever read a superhero comic expecting to get some interesting insight into the human condition. I wanted to get some interesting insight into the extra human or the Homo superior position if you read X-Men. And that's okay. I understand if you aren't going to buy into the reality of superheroes as they exist, you're never going to buy into the films. You're never going to see value in them. And I get that. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think the single greatest achievement of Joker is for the very first time, we have seen a potential comic book character completely pulled out of the comic book milieu. And this is set firmly in the real world. Does it have connections to its comic book universe? Oh, absolutely. Shamelessly so. This is, make no mistake, indeed a comic book movie. There's even references. Let's just say Joker, this isn't a spoiler because it's never mentioned in the movie, but there are things in it that firmly establish this movie takes place in 1981. How do I know it takes place in 1981? Because let's just say there's a theater. There's a theater in this movie for a particular reason. And outside the theater, there are a number of Warner Brothers movie posters, including Arthur, Wolfen, and perhaps most tellingly, Excalibur. Now, you imagination connoisseurs, you can take that Excalibur reference as you will. Certainly, it could just be because it takes place in 1981. But this movie could have taken place in 1980, or it could have taken place in 1982. They very specifically chose 1981 and very specifically chose to feature an Excalibur one sheet. Why do you think they did that? I'll leave that up for you to decide. But anyway, this movie, and I think one of the greatest, if not the greatest thing about Joker, is that it is the very first time that we have seen a comic book character or anything derived from a superhero comic completely demystified, completely pulled down to earth, and they treated for, I mean, we can say that Superman the movie did a lot of that, the original Superman the movie, but still, it was very much, it still took place not in necessarily our world. There was a lot of flourishes in it. Really brought Superman down to earth, but not to the extent that the Joker does. The Joker takes place in a world that is firmly our terra firma, for the most part. And it is, as a film, it is a stunning achievement on every level, except one. My greatest criticism of the Joker is that ultimately, despite everything that happens to him, the character is an idiot. He's dumb. And one of the things that I think was completely missing from this movie is a philosophy. He has none. There is no manifesto. I kept waiting. I was waiting. Is what happens to Arthur Fleck in this film is the world that Arthur Fleck that he inhabits, the way that this pressure cooker of the life that he is leading, as it is molding and sculpting him, will it cause him to develop a philosophy of life, a philosophy where he's able to take his acumen, his actual untapped genius or undiscovered genius, to create something, to be proactive in his life, where you could see the seeds being planted, where he could actually rise to take on at one point. I would love to believe that a character like Arthur Fleck could one day match wits with the Dark Knight detective. Because otherwise, why make it about the Joker? Why not just make it about defends Michael Douglas's character and falling down? This is, make no mistake, still a movie about Joker. The character in this movie, as depicted, as beautifully acted as he is, and Joaquin Phoenix does a marvelously stunning job of portraying this character. He's dumb. He is not a smart person. He is not even proactive. And what's really disappointing about that is what I wanted to see is, an undiscovered, and I never want to, I don't believe in reviewing movies as you wanted them to be. I believe that movies should always be reviewed and looked at as they are. And in this case, you're never going to convince me, as beautiful as this movie was to look at, and as stunningly made and directed as it was, the movie fell down in the writing for me. It absolutely let the character of Joker down, because basically he is a mentally ill man that's on many medications, that has no intelligence, no philosophy, no manifesto. And at the end of the movie, well, I'll leave that up. I can't, I don't want to spoil it. And I haven't heard anybody talk about this. And when I was sitting there at the end of the film, I kept thinking, I hate to say it, but I kept going back and I started thinking about Watchmen, and both Rorschach and The Comedian. And I've never heard, of course, Alan Moore wrote The Killing Joke. Somebody even accused me on Twitter when I said I found the movie disappointing. They're like, "Oh, it's just not the way Joker is depicted in the comics." And I was like, it has nothing to do with that. But then I thought, oh, wait a minute. It kind of is, because at least in the comics, and how everybody talks about the Joker, is that it's yin and yang. Batman and Joker are yin and yang. They have a mutual respect. They can't exist without the other. That's because the Joker, as depicted in the comic, for the most part, is a diabolical crime. He's the crown prince of crime. The man is diabolical. He plans. He has a great intellect. I saw none of that in Joker. As a matter of fact, I saw a mentally ill, very sad individual that leads a pretty terrible life, who he doesn't even, it's not even like he's a Tyler Durden-esque figure that comes up with some crazy cockamamie scheme to do anything. He does not. And the things that he does do are, maybe they are done, maybe they're not. I'm going to leave I'll leave that up to you guys to decipher on your own. But what I found, it bummed me out, because watching King of Comedy and watching Taxi Driver, especially Taxi Driver, which this movie again shamelessly borrows from. It just, I kept waiting for that moment where the character suddenly impressed me. I was on his side. I love movies about bad people, anti-heroes, or just villains. Clockwork Orange is another Warner Brothers movie, one of my favorite films of all time. It used to be my favorite film of all time until The Godfather took its place. But there's something about great villains. Great villains, they're smart, they're diabolical, they have philosophies. And you know what other movie I was thinking about when I watched this? This might seem a little off the wall to you. Uh, Videodrome. David Cronenberg's Videodrome. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen Videodrome. I love the film, even though the technology is incredibly dated, but the way it plays with reality and fantasy and real life and what's actually going on, it even has that look because Videodrome was basically shot at the same time this movie was set. So very in the early 80s. Very, very interesting to me, that whole milieu, very interesting. But there's this scene in Videodrome where the main character, Max Wren, is looking for this very nasty show that he's found on a pirate station called Videodrome, which is basically torture and degradation, and that's all it is. And Max Wren wants to find it. He basically wants to find the people who made it, maybe put it on his own fledgling cable channel. And he meets somebody, one of his friends that he's dealt with in the past, a woman that presumably actually is in love with him in the film. But she tells him this. She tells him she's found out about Videodrome, but she says, Max, don't go after Videodrome. Don't go after it because it's dangerous. And Videodrome is dangerous because it has a philosophy. And when I was watching Joker, I was thinking about those words. And I kept waiting for my character here, Joker, who I have loved in so many different incarnations, whether it's in the comics. Hell, I was a kid. I loved Joker. I love Cesar Romero as Joker. Who doesn't love Jack Nicholson as Joker? Of course, we've had Heath Ledger and, of course, Jared Leto's Joker. We've seen Jokers on the big screen. One of the great things about Heath Ledger's Joker is he was constantly spouting his personal philosophy every time he came on screen, and that's what made him a great character. He had purpose. He had methodology. He had reason. Even when Michael Caine says some men just want to watch the world burn, that's a philosophy. The Joker in this movie has none. And that disappointed me. I kept waiting for this principal character. He just ends up reacting to his life. And he didn't engage me as a character. I certainly understood his plight. I saw him as a, first of all, if anything, I thought this movie actually did sort of a disservice to people that are really mentally ill, that are, I mean, the streets of Los Angeles are choked with tens of thousands of potential Jokers out there. And it made me sad. And I was like, what does this movie really have to say? Sure, they make him a bad guy. He's a bad guy, but he is never, the character in this movie will never be a diabolical criminal mastermind that could go toe-to-toe with Batman. Unless, of course, he takes a lot of schooling. Maybe he gets off his meds. I don't know. That's what I wanted from this movie. I wanted to believe that this character that asks to be called Joker could one day become, and by the way, make no mistake, this is supposed to be the beginnings of Joker. It is. They hammer this point home. And it'll be interesting to see the op-ed pieces. I think, look, for a lot of people, especially younger people that have not watched Taxi Driver, have not seen King of Comedy, hell, didn't see a lot of the movies of the 70s, movies like Network or A Clockwork Orange. There's a lot of 70s cinema. Todd Phillips obviously grew up watching a lot of the same movies I certainly grew up watching. And he's put together a masterful package. I mean, this is first-rate studio filmmaking. And I cannot believe that this movie was even made. Kudos to Warner Brothers. Kudos to Todd Phillips. Kudos to Joaquin Phoenix, because this film is astonishing in that it even exists. This movie would never have been allowed 5 years ago. People would have said, you can't make this movie about the Joker. There's no way. So you got to hand it to everybody involved in this film, because it is a stunning film. And the fact that it's a studio picture, the fact that Michael Uslan gets this executive producer credit, who was one of the people instrumental in getting Tim Burton's Batman made because he's owned the rights for so long, it's unbelievable. So I was sitting there thinking to myself, this film transcends the comic book genre. This takes it to another level. This means that I was so excited with now the fact that the perception of what a comic book movie is forever changed. We've seen it coming down the pike. We've seen it with things like Logan. We've seen it now with Joker. What this means for comic book movies. No, I'm not talking about graphic novels like Road to Perdition or Ghost World or other things, American Splendor, that have been based on more real world graphic novels. I'm talking specifically about what this means for the superhero and supervillain genre. This is a game changer. A game changer. Make no mistake. It is in every way, shape, or form. I just wish it was smarter. I wish it was a smarter movie. At the end of the day, it you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of many of the people I knew in high school. We were all full of ourselves. There were the drama club people. There was the high school newspaper writers. And we all, as we were going off to college, man, as high school seniors, we were smart. Or at least we all thought we were. This reminded me of that. It reminded me, I'm watching this incredible movie made by very talented people that just think they're smarter than they really are. And I think actually, everybody who made this movie was damn smart. I'll give you an example of something I can say that really bothered me in the movie. There's a use of the song Rock and Roll Part 2, Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll Part 2, that they used to use in sporting events. Everyone knows the song when you hear it. Gary Glitter is now a convicted pedophile. So that song, while sure, in the time period the movie was made, would be there. Why? Why that particular song? Now, I understand the associations, but if you're putting that particular song in the film. Now, a lot of people aren't even going to remember what it is, especially if you're younger. You don't know Gary Glitter. You don't know Rock and Roll Part 2. You don't know the song. But when I was sitting there, I'm like, okay, not only did they put this song there, they had to get the rights to use it. And the question I was like asking myself is, okay, you're bringing in this idea of pedophilia. And they also do something that I thought was a little disingenuous with Arthur Fleck's mother. But I can't really get into it. But I was wondering, is this an oblique sort of reference to something they haven't brought up, or they did? I mean, it raised questions in my mind that I didn't quite understand the connection. I'm wondering, okay, you're using this song for a reason. And if you're using this song for a reason, which you've spent a lot of time doing, there's only a certain, there's like a certain direction that I guess I'm supposed to go in to make a connection with the reason you've used this song in the film. And I'm like, was that a good thing to do? And if you're going to do that, if you're going to bring that up, if you're going to make me as an audience member think about it, well, okay, then maybe that was supposed to be there. Maybe I'm supposed to infer a message from this particular, but sometimes I also felt like, no, they just threw that in there. And again, I felt that what this movie lacked was razor sharp, razor sharp, razor focused intent. I thought the messages that they're trying to convey they're not exactly profound. Life's bad and this can happen. But there's been a lot of talk of oh, this is an incel anthem or whatever. But I hate to say it, but even incel poster boy Elliot Rodger wrote over 100-page manifesto about why he was doing what he was going to do. Insane, ridiculous, and out of control and crazy as it was. Like Videodrome, Elliot Rodger had a philosophy. And I kept waiting because they drew this parallel about how this is supposed to be about. This movie was not about incels. It wasn't. It was about a person who grew up in horrible circumstances, who was not a very smart man, who finally reached a breaking point. And if anything, this just made me sad. It made me wish that we help those who are mentally ill, help those who are less fortunate. And what I wanted to see was the birth of a criminal mastermind. That's what I was looking for in this film. And I didn't get it. I didn't get it. There's a lot of people that aren't going to feel the same way. I know, judging from the conversations I had with Harloff and John Campea, that they came out of it, and I think that they were much more enamored of this film than I was. And I know that there's been a lot of other people that are much more enamored of it. I think that this movie is, at first glance, it seems far more profound than it actually is. And I wanted more from it. Now, this is me. I wanted to leave the movie knowing that the Joker was still out there and where he was going to go and what he was going to become. I did not believe that the character Arthur Fleck was ever going to go anywhere except into a padded cell. I just didn't believe. You know, I am the viceroy of verisimilitude after all. I wanted to see somebody who had a philosophy. I keep thinking about other characters. John Doe in Seven and all the diaries he kept. Sure, he was insane, but his plan with the 7 deadly sins, what he was hoping to achieve, he had a philosophy. I keep going back to Videodrome. Videodrome had a philosophy. This movie doesn't. The Joker doesn't. And I think ultimately that means that the movie itself, at least for me, didn't work. I wanted it to work better than it did. I know a lot of people have been firing in some chats here. Paul Mayall says, keep up the good work, bud. Well, Paul, thank you very much. Paul I would assume from the UK. Thank you. CJ Dunn says, Rob, my man, how was Joker? I want to see it, but I don't know with all the reports throughout the army about an attack if I should. Look, here's the thing I want to say about that. I don't think anybody who actually watches this movie, when you get to the end of this film, it's not about that kind of thing. It's not about, look, I think anybody that watches this film, I don't care who you are, is not going to necessarily feel a kinship to Arthur Fleck. You'll feel pity and you'll feel bad for him. And at the end of the day, what it made me really want to do is go back to the time when we cared about the mentally ill that are choking our streets and to help them. It really, if anything else, this movie just made me want to go out and help people, I guess, because and that was something that bothered me. I wanted to, at the end, and maybe this was just me. So again, you have to take this with a grain of salt. You have to take this with how I'm thinking about this. I wanted to revel in the birth of the criminal mastermind that could go toe-to-toe with Batman. That's what I wanted to see. At the end of this movie, I just saw a damaged individual that really, he didn't threaten me at all. As a matter of fact, well, I want to get into it. I don't want to get into it because I don't want to. I've remained as spoiler free as possible, but I do. I mean, I hate to say this. I don't hate to say it. You've got to see this movie for yourself, especially as an imagination connoisseur. If you like comic book films, you have to see this film because it is a revelation in terms of how comic book characters can be approached on the big screen. It is truly transcendent. It is truly a watershed moment in superhero cinema, comic book cinema. And for that alone, I totally appreciate what was done. I could only hope to ever aspire to make a movie that is this technically proficient, this beautiful, this well acted. Look, my problem with the film is not as a film necessarily. It was with the writing and with the character of the Joker. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. The film is provocative. It is interesting. It will make you feel something. What it makes you feel, I don't know, but it will make you feel. And that a major studio released this movie in this day and age is amazing. And for that alone, you should support it. Because, my God, I might have a problem with Todd Phillips shamelessly aping and ripping off Scorsese. But you know what? I also miss the fact that people used to make movies like Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, and they were released by studios. We don't have that anymore. And I think the conversation and the op-ed pieces, hell, you listening to me talk right now, I think that's enough. The fact that we're having these kinds of conversations about a movie like this, fantastic. Everybody should go see it who's an imagination connoisseur. One thing I would say, if there's any parents out there, this is not a film for children. It isn't even a film for, I mean, this is under 17, not admitted without parent or guardian. I mean, I really do think that this movie does require that you bring in a certain level of maturity into it. And I would hope that people use discretion when they're deciding who should see the film. That's another, I can't believe that Warner Brothers made a movie like this about Joker. Then again, I couldn't believe about the portrayal of Joker in Suicide Squad either, even though most of it was all cut out. But still, Dan Allen says, Martin Scorsese isn't wrong in his opinion. He just makes different kinds of movies. That's all. Interesting. I think you might be right about that. Absolutely. Madzif Jada says, the only fault of this movie is that it's called Joker. Well, you know, I think you might be right about that because you're creating expectations. But again, you know, this movie posits, how could a character like Joker come into being? It is definitely an origin story. My problem with it was, as I've said, the Joker does not, as evidenced by this film, I didn't see that this character has a future as a clown prince of crime, as someone that could go toe to toe with Batman. And I thought that was problematic. As a matter of fact, as an anti-hero, you know, even if you go back and you think about some of the great, if you look at movies about youth, I know Arthur Fleck is not a young man, but if you go back and you watch Lindsay Anderson's If, or you watch the teen film, one of Matt Dillon's first roles, Over the Edge, you know, there are films that touch on these issues that have a lot more going on in them than this does. And Dan Allen says, RMB, I think you completely missed the point of the film. It's about government and the medical system not being able to help him. Oh, I completely agree with you. You know, it's very overtly about that. You know, and I think he is getting lots of help. He's getting lots of medicine. Of course, you know, the medical system does let him down. And I get that. All of society is letting him down. But, you know, as we all know, you know that I mean, from the very beginning, Arthur Fleck's job is he's playing a clown. Clowns that are hired out, whether it's for birthday parties or whether it's for spinning as we've seen in the trailers, spinning a sandwich board saying grand opening or what special deals. I mean, that's how the movie begins. This isn't exactly subtle. This isn't exactly, there's not 1 ounce of subtlety in this movie's DNA. So I understand that's there. I haven't missed that point at all. I get it. You can't not. It's not like this movie has a point to miss. Dan Allen says, goes on to say, Arthur Fleck needed to talk to someone. He needed to get his frustrations out, but they provided meds for him and he became crazy. Yeah, I get all that. He became crazy. I do. But, you know, that's that. Like Todd Phillips has said, the movies he looked at, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, there's a lot of that in here. I would say there's, like I said earlier, Videodrome, King of Comedy, Taxi Driver, even structurally, my God. So I didn't miss all of that. I think it's definitely all there. But and I told you what I was missing. Rakan Man 85 says 10 out of 10 as a movie, 8 out of 10 as a Joker movie. Again, I don't know if I can go there. I didn't think the movie to me gets a 10 out of 10 because it's just not as smart as it thinks it is. At least for me. I needed, again, more philosophy from it. To me, it's not easy to make the kind of movie it is, but to be as provocative as this movie is not hard to do. The scenes of violence in the film are shocking indeed, but they're also easy violence. It's something where, you know, just like getting punched in the face, you know, there's a difference. There's a difference when you're torturing somebody to get punched in the face or if you're pulling out their fingernails one by one. One is direct, and maybe that's what they wanted to do. Another one requires a little bit of thought. you know, but I do 8 out of 10 as a Joker movie. I wouldn't even give it that. I'd say it's maybe a 5 as a Joker movie. As a movie, I'd give it a 7.5. I think, look, it just let me down. But as I said, it's a beautifully made movie. It's a watershed film. It's an important movie. And I think what's interesting is it is going to be a much talked about film. And that's the best part. The best part is it's going to get people talking. It's smart, ultimately. It's smart in a way that a lot of studio pictures are not. I don't think it's smart enough, but it is definitely something that people are going to talk about for a long time to come. And I think that is tremendous. Jordy Lyon says, I just want to extend a congrats to the Nashville film industry on 50 years. I'm sure you would join with me wishing their continued success. You know, it's interesting, Jordy. I don't know much about the Nashville film industry, but I was able to go there last year for the first time. Tennessee, I'd never been there before. What a great state. My God, is it beautiful. Nashville and the surrounding areas. I was very impressed. And the people, the food, the culture, the history that you're surrounded by. I really like Nashville. I would love to one day make a film there. So absolutely, 50 years. Congratulations, Nashville film industry. I think that is absolutely very cool. I would support them a lot. Racanman85 says, well executed is what I mean. Oh, I mean, this is studio filmmaking at its finest. And you know what else? I'll tell you something. What I really did like about Joker is it was truly Todd Phillips's vision. I did not see a lot of, well, there's one thing I'll talk about later, but there was one thing I could see he might have had a studio note that they had to change in the movie, and it related to the overarching mythology of the Bat universe. But I did think it was a beautifully done movie. Again, it's truly the vision of Todd Phillips. He went after something. He wanted to do something very specific, and he went out and did it. It's truly an auteurist vision, and for that also it is to be respected. It is not a movie made by committee. It is a brave movie. Walter Hamada at Warner Brothers gets an executive producer credit on this film, and if this is the direction he wants to take, this movie would never be made in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not to compare and contrast the two, because I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, as a matter of fact, you know, what can I say? 4K. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. No, I didn't get the Steelbook. Although I should say, I pre-ordered the Shining Steelbook, so that, yeah. But I can't speak enough about the how much courage it took as a studio to make this film. And I think it's great. Mark C says Alan Moore portrayed him as a comic who had one bad day. Denny O'Neil has called him chaos incarnate. You've read something into the Joker I've only seen recently in film and comics. I don't think I've read anything into the Joker, even as again, my big problem is I understand a comic who had one bad day. I don't mind that either, but I just saw Arthur Fleck as being portrayed as dumb. I wanted some intelligence in the character. I wanted him to. He's like an animal that has been beaten down and treated poorly his whole life, literally since the time he was a little boy. And did that lead him to becoming a diabolical super mastermind? No. He just has stunted growth and all of that. And I get it. This is my reading of the movie. Am I right? Maybe not necessarily. But again, you know, if you want to equate that character as portrayed in Joker the movie and draw the line to him later, I mean, it would be interesting to see. I would love to see how Todd Phillips would then take this character he's created and make him go toe-to-toe. I will say there's another thing that I really did object to about this film that also, this is just me too. The idea of taking shots at the 1% and those that are well-heeled. I mean, it's so heavy-handed. Yes, Wall Street types are bad people. I mean, I get it. Like it was very heavy-handed. And again, I would hope that it would be a little bit more. I felt Taxi Driver was a far more intelligent film, far more insightful movie than Joker. But because, look, we're dealing with a comic book character, we're seeing something we've never seen before, which makes it significant and very interesting and definitely worth seeing. I mean, it's you got to see it. If you're an imagination connoisseur and you love cinema and you like all kinds of cinema, this is a must see. Flat out say it. Unbreakable gets no credit with how it presented superheroes in real life. Also, I thought it was a great movie. What are your thoughts? Well, this is Alexander Wilson. Alexander Wilson is a longtime contributor, both to the channel itself and as far as dialogue and philosophy are concerned. I always appreciate Alexander's chats or whatever he sends in. Always interesting, as this one is. I loved Unbreakable. As a matter of fact, I loved all three movies. I was a little disappointed in Glass, only in that it was so contained, but I loved Split. And I think you're right. I think Unbreakable does a great job in presenting how superheroes might be in real life. Absolutely. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie. It was Shyamalan's third theatrically released feature. He had a small one before Sixth Sense. But yeah, I thought it was great. But back to Mark C's comment about Denny O'Neil, chaos incarnate. It's true, he is chaos incarnate, but he's also, you got to have, if you're going to believe in the Joker and his plans, you've got to believe that he's smart, and you've got to believe that he can lead. And one of the things that I was disappointed by, there is an image at the end of the film that sort of alludes to that, but if you really think about what's happening, not really. But people are going to talk about this. Thoughts on Iron Man Project Exodus deleted scene? I have not seen this deleted scene. I don't know what that is. I'm sure it's on one of the Blu-rays, or maybe it's online. I haven't caught up with it yet. Carlos Herrera says Falling Down could be a great Joker story. Look, I agree. I thought Falling Down was, I guess, to me, there's a lot of similarities in Falling Down, another Warner Brothers movie that was directed by Joel Schumacher, with Joker. Definitely the uncaring modern world and one man rising up against it. I think you're absolutely right about that. Do It for Cash says, I saw a clown prince, but not one of crime. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, this movie, I think, is a real litmus test for people. And I think it's going to be one of these hotly debated movies for a long time, especially within genre circles, these imagination connoisseur circles, which I love. I love the fact that it's going to be hotly debated. I love the fact that people are talking about film, because how often do we get a major studio release that people are really excited about? Not often. And I think, for this is going to blow the minds of look, there's going to be kids that watch this movie that are going to have their minds blown. And this movie is going to be a fulcrum for the rest of their lives. And I think, in a good way. Maybe like when I was 13 and saw Clockwork Orange for the first time, and famously I've said, well, maybe I'm famously for me, it was the first movie I ever watched back to back. I watched it for the first time and I didn't quite get it all. I rewound it and watched it again. I am sure that younger viewers who are way too young to see Joker now are going to grow up. They're going to see this film, and it's going to lead them to a life of inquiry. I don't think this movie is going to inspire revolution, or it's going to inspire incels to take up arms against people. I don't think that's what this movie is really about. I don't think it's not about that at all. I think if anything, I mean, what I would like to see is maybe some kid be disappointed by the portrayal of the lack of philosophy and lack of acumen on the part of the main character, and decide themselves to become the clown prince of crime, grow up and become a diabolical mastermind that knows something about everything. Although I don't think that this movie is going to do that. But it would be interesting if, in fact, it did. So Who knows? JB Bonifacio is here. Scorsese, Marvel movies aren't cinema. Me hits bong once. But what is cinema? Well, JB, that's a good question. I mean, I think, look, there is making good movies is really, really hard. And as you know, we've talked about what is storytelling, but an effort to try and communicate human truths to one another, to others. Things that we might have seen, we as storytellers are trying to convey human truths to our audiences. That's what storytelling is all about. And I think when Martin Scorsese is talking about superhero movies being like theme parks, like when you go to a theme park and you ride a great roller coaster. Now, there's an art to great roller coasters. Love them. I love roller coasters. I love theme parks. I love to feel that exhilaration. It makes me feel alive. But at the end of the day, you know, other than that exhilarating physical feeling of an amusement park, is there a lot to take with you when you leave, other than the fact that you had a great time and you were exhilarated? No. You know, I don't think anyone's going to mistake Ingmar Bergman's films. Like if you're going to watch The Virgin Spring or the Persona, you know, or Seventh Seal, you know, they're not going to be equated to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and nor should they. And I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like Scorsese was saying, they are more akin to. Now, I love superheroes. I've grown up with them. I've grown up reading comics. I have many comics, and I just think that it's his cinema, the cinema of Martin Scorsese, is different than superhero cinema. And the problem is he looks at, once you're telling a story about a superhero, a superhuman, then you can inject our truths into those stories, but really you're one step removed away from mankind because you're telling a story about a superhero. So I understand what Martin Scorsese is saying. It would be interesting. I would really be interested to hear what does he think of this movie. I think in a way he's going to be like, well, somebody's got to send me a residual check. somebody has seen Taxi Driver and owes me something. Maybe or not, but I think Scorsese would find that pretty interesting. But who knows? You know, it's hard to say. It is hard to say. But what do you guys? I just can't wait to hear what everyone thinks. I can't wait till this all disseminates and you guys into the whisper stream of the imagination connoisseur community. John Suntress here from the Word Balloon podcast. As many people know, whenever John is here, he supports the channel. He, for a long time, has had an incredible podcast called the Word Balloon podcast about comic books and pop culture. He's had a lot of great comic creators on. He's got years worth of stuff to listen to. He is here. John says, made the falling down Joker point to Brian Hitch last night in my podcast too. Don't want this to be the definitive Joker origin. It's just an alt story. I agree. That was another thing. I don't think this is a particularly good definitive Joker origin story. I do see this as an alternate, maybe an Elseworld story of how a man could possibly be put on the road to becoming Joker. I don't see this guy ever being able to be a threat for Batman. And make no mistake, the movie wants you to talk about Batman. The movie does. I'm not going to say anything, but it does. This definitely draws a line. Is this part of the DC cinematic universe? I don't know, but hey, there's Excalibur one sheets in it, right? But yeah, there are things that I don't necessarily agree with. But yeah, I mean, this definitely does draw a line. This is not a movie that doesn't touch on Batman. And so yeah. So we without getting into it, yeah, who's to say? But you know, it is very, very interesting. And I do think that I'm eagerly awaiting what the fan community said. There's a lot of people that I respect. There's a lot of people I like Chris Stuckman really liked this film. I watched his review of it, and I understand. I understand the love that people have for this. And as I said, I'm a fan of the filmmaking. I'm a fan of what they tried to do, but I think this movie is it's first year philosophy student at best. The Joker himself has no philosophy. There is no manifesto. Um, uh, I think the movie did need a little bit more Tyler Durden or Alex DeLarge or John Doe from Seven. I think it needed something like that, which I didn't feel it gave us, and that bummed me out to a certain extent. Mark C says, if I'm going to have an origin, I prefer it be multiple choice. The Joker. Yeah. I mean, look, that's one of the great things I loved about Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight. He has a different origin for every. How did I get these scars? For whoever he talks about. My problem is whatever origin this character, whatever origin Arthur Fleck has, it ain't going to be the Joker that goes toe to toe with the Batman. That just ain't going to happen. Madzif Jada says, Todd wanted to be Scorsese, but had nothing deep to say. I totally agree with that. 100%. It's a beautifully made film. It's got all the right ingredients, but I thought it was empty at the end of the day. It was really well made, but where I was let down was with the writing. Stubble McShave says, generally characters get more interesting when they have a combination of proactivity and competence. Maybe they wanted it sad and maybe they wanted a sad and maybe they wanted a sad and why can't I say uninteresting character. I think you're right. That's where it let me down. The Joker, I wanted to be a complex character. I wanted the Joker. I want my Joker to be smart and diabolical. I want to see where that character might have come from or where that character is going. And I felt that that's where the movie let me down. But as an example of taking a character and humanizing them and putting them more in the real world and perhaps offering a perspective more, maybe that wasn't the intent. Maybe the intent was more to be like through the prism of the character of Joker, of Arthur Fleck. Maybe it really was. Maybe Todd Phillips wanted to speak about our society today. He certainly does, and make those points about the 1% and make those points about our healthcare system and how it's been letting down. But again, even the scenes with all of that were, I hate to say it, very cliche, very one-dimensional. It was not something that we haven't heard before. You can't get the mental help you deserve because budget cuts. I mean, it even, look, the movie even begins during the midst of a garbage strike. And the streets are full of festering garbage. I mean, as a metaphor, I get it. I understand. The streets are full of garbage. Literally. I'm like, okay, it's a little didactic, little heavy-handed. I understand. I get the metaphor. The streets are stinking sewers. I understand. Yeah. But that was, to me, I'm like, I get it. There was a real garbage strike once, and this was not something that was lost upon me. But I was like, really? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring this chat to an end because John Campea, he told me that there was going to be no John Campea show today, but he's doing one at 1:00. And I will defer to my friend John and give him go all watch John show, I guess. I'd love to stay on and talk about this more, but I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. If you like these chats, please hit like, please subscribe, please go to my website, theburnettwork.net. You will see letters there. You will see Imagination Connoisseur galleries there. You will see 3-word movie reviews, which all of you can participate in. Please do. We have a great community here. You Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, couldn't do it without you. Let's keep the channel growing. It's terrific. Those of you who might be at the New York City Comic-Con, have a good time. And everybody should go see Joker. I can't wait to continue this conversation with you. Thank you very much. I want to thank my moderators. I want to thank Detective Jim, who I can't wait to hear what he thinks of this movie because of what it has to say about law enforcement. I want to thank Mike Bodden, the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden. I want to thank, of course, Terry, the Sheriff of Nottingham. And I want to thank Greg Smith. And we might be having some new moderators coming in, joining the fray. So everyone, thank you for being here. And I will say, remember, everybody, even people like Arthur Fleck, have a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I bid you farewell. I will see you tomorrow. Have a better day.